what I want to discuss today is about climate change, responsibility of climate change, which is crucial issues globally. In this presentation, I want to start our discussion with a simple yet profound question that we often overlook in news. Is it fair to ask a developing nation to slow down its economy to fix a global climate crisis that it did not create? The contemporary conversation around global climate governance is fundamentally trapped in a painful ethical paradox. The catastrophic consequences of climate change, like extreme drought, unprecedented floods, and crop failures, are being disproportionately suffered by countries in the global south. Global south means Africa, India, right, which are developing countries. In contrast, global north means America, Korea, Japan, which are developed countries. Yet historically, these geopolitical bloc contributed the absolute risk to the greenhouse gases currently trapping heat in our atmosphere. As the international community synchronized its effort to stop us from crossing a dangerous planetary tipping point, a polarizing debate has emerged. Should emerging economy face the exact same binding emission restriction as wealthy developed nations? While we all agree that mitigating climate change requires a massive coordinated global effort, we cannot ignore a simple reality. Nation-states operate under completely different socio-economic worlds. Developed economies have internal structural stability and accumulate wealth. Developing countries, however, are compelled by urgent human rights imperatives to prioritize domestic economic progression, basic infrastructure, and poverty alleviation. Therefore, my main argument today is that the architecture of global climate action cannot be egalitarian in its demand. Instead, it must be carefully calibrated to respect the historical responsibility and unique economic capacity of individual nations. Genuine global sustainability cannot be achieved through a one-size-fits-all framework. It requires a rigorously differentiated approach that balances ecological needs with socio-economic justice. To truly understand why this is a matter of basic fairness, we have to get the climate crisis through a historical cumulative lens. Rather than just looking at today's annualized data, carbon dioxide stays in our atmosphere for centuries. This means the crisis we face today is the physical legacy of over 250 years of unrestricted industrialization that began in Western Europe in the mid-18th century. Developed nations used cheap, high-pollution fossil fuels like coal and oil to build their massive sovereign wealth, advanced infrastructure, and high standard of living. The empirical data highlights a shocking historical asymmetry. Statistical analysis of cumulative global emission from 1751 to the present show that the United States and the European Union are collectively responsible for more than 50% of the historical carbon load currently in the atmosphere. Conversely, the entire continent of Africa, alongside the vast region of Latin America and South Asia, accounts for less than 5% of this cumulative total, even though they represent the overwhelming majority of global population. Expecting emerging economies to carry an identical regulatory burden to that of post-industrial society is equivalent to demanding that the victim of an economic externality fund the remediation of a crisis they did not engineer. International law actually recognizes these historical disparities through a foundational ethical framework called the principle of common, but differentiated responsibility, or CBDR, initiated in Principle 7 of the 1992 Rio Declaration. This doctrine explicitly states that while all states share a common duty to protect the biosphere, their responsibility must vary based on their historical contributions and their technological and financial capacity. Developed states possess the accumulated capital to absorb the economic shocks of transitioning to green energy. Developing nations simply lack these structural shock absorbers. Now you might wonder why can't developing nations just bypass fossil fuels and adopt renewable energy right away? The answer lies in a systematic defect known as energy poverty. According to the United Nations, over 600 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa and parts of South Asia still lack basic access to electricity. This defect directly correlates with tragic human indicators, including high infant mortality and localized industrial stagnation. For this population, the primary immediate existential threat is not a long-term projection of rising sea level in this year, 2050. Their threat is the immediate is really of starvation, lack of clean water, and the obsessive indoor heating. When an emerging economy is exploit domestic coal or gas, their objective is to fulfill the most basic obligation of state sovereignty, lifting millions of citizens out of absolute poverty, forcing them to prematurely adopt immature, intermittent renewable grids without baseline energy security, threaten to trap vulnerable population in a permanent state of economic subjunction. Furthermore, the macroeconomic architecture of renewable energy presents a massive financial barriers. Green energy systems require immense upfront capital expenditure because of relative credit rating and historical debt burden. The cost of capital in Global South is punitively high. The International Energy Agency point out that a clean energy project is an emerging market faces a cost of capital that is up to 3 to 4 times higher than an identical project in Western Europe or North America. While wealthy nations borrow at 3% to 5% interest rate, developing nations face rates between 12% and 18% without international financial intervention, forcing a low-income nation to transition exclusively to green energy mandates that divert scarce revenue away from public health care and education to service interest climate goals. We see a secondary equally instructive manifestation of this friction in the contemporary debate surrounding natural ages in Africa. In the wake of the 2022 European energy crisis, Western nations rapidly adjusted their foreign policy to aggressively secure feed natural gas shipments from African procedure to stabilize European grids. Concurrently, however, this same Western nation maintained strict domestic bans on financing any new fossil fuel infrastructure within Africa for domestic Africa consumption. African policymakers have rightly condemned this dual standard as a form of environmental colonialism, deny international loans for domestic natural gas, which is vital cleaner transition fuel compared to biomass, while extracting those same resources for European consumption creates an indefensible ethical contradiction. So what is the path toward? To construct a globally viable climate architecture, the international community must move past the empty rhetorical agreements and operationalize true equity through two critical pillars: finance and technology. First, we must reform the global regime of intellectual property rights. Currently, advanced patents for solar photovoltaics, green hydrogen, and carbon capture are heavily concentrated within a handful of multinational corporations based in the global north. Implementing a climate-driven behavior similar to the flexibility allowed for public health spaces would allow developing nations to manufacture and access advanced renewable technology at cost, bypassing expensive licensing fees. In conclusion, climate justice is not an idealistic barrier to effective climate action. It is the absolute pragmatic prerequisite for its success. In the anarchic system of international relations, if an international treaty demands that a sovereign nation choose between reducing carbon emission or preventing the immediate economic collapse of its domestic industries, the state will invariably choose its own survival. A climate framework that attempts to protect the planet by entrenching global poverty will inevitably fail. To save our shared biosphere, we must understand that the human equity is not an afterthought. It is the only sustainable path toward. Thank you for listening my long presentation.
Any one question? No question? Okay, he had a long presentation, so we'll just finish now. Okay, well done.